What's going on, Fox fans? Wanted to do a brief video to show how relatively easy it is to change out the hydraulic cylinders on the convertible top. Searching eBay, searching eBay. You could tell what I was just on. Searching YouTube, I couldn't find any videos relative to the Fox, whether it be 83 to 93 or more specifically 87 to 93. The only couple videos I found that were useful were related to the SN and New Edge vehicles. And after tearing mine apart, I could tell the interior structure was not the same. The videos were good, it gave me an idea what I needed to do, but from an internal framework, there's definitely some differences. So reading online of some of the complaints and horror stories about what a pain in the ass this project is, I just simply did not find that to be the case. So I wanted to show what I found to be the tricks. The way I knew that I had a hydraulic leak was I came out in the garage this summer and I had a little puddle right here in front of the driver's side was leaking, and what's happening is the cylinder was failing, leaking into the floor pan under the back seat and then getting down through the crease in the fender wells there. So nice little surprise. I thought I had brake issues or something, but then I realized it was hydraulic from the top because that's where the cylinders are. What happens is the cylinders fail with age, not necessarily use. This is a 93 with 2,900 miles. I mean, this car is not even due for its first oil change technically, but the hydraulic cylinders had failed. And it's just simply from not being used. The top goes up or down once or twice a year on this car. But what happens is the O-ring on the inside where that ram pops up was leaking. So I had a nice little, pool of hydraulic fluid right here that would drip down the cylinder and of course into the floor pan. I also read online where this is easiest to do with the top down, because with the cylinder all the way down, there's no fluid in the cylinder. Well, that's just simply not the case, because this motor is pumping fluid two ways. It's pumping into the bottom and pulling from here, obviously, to raise that plunger up, to raise that ram all the way up, and of course put the top up, and then it's reversing process to pull that ram in all the way down for the top down. So it really doesn't matter which way you do this, you're going to have fluid coming out of that ram. And quite honestly, that's the hardest part of this project, is cleaning your hands and your tools, because you're going to get hydraulic fluid on you. So with that out of the way, one other thing I would point out, two things on this ram, or on this cylinder I should say. The white bushings, these are what come on the replacement. They are not wide enough to provide a tight fit. So pop those off and either get rid of them or put them on your old cylinders if you're going to save them. And use your factory bushings that come with that ram, because it's going to provide a better fit. And then when you hear me talk about studs on the framework of the convertible top, the studs I'm talking about actually stick into that hole and that hole right there. That's what holds that together into the framework. So you'll hear me mention the studs here when I show you the bracket I'm talking about. First thing you need to do, very easy process, is remove the rear seat and the interior trim panels. And if you've never removed a rear seat before, particularly on a convertible, it's really easy. The seat bottom comes out just like any other Fox body seat. 93, this one being a little different, there's actually some rail mounts on the floor pan, but you can see that little U in the framework. That's what's holding it in place. And quite simply, you grab the middle of the seat on top of the tunnel for the drive shaft, and you pull up and that thing's gonna pop out. Get that seat out of your way. You got two 7/16 bolts, one on the bottom of each corner. You can see that lowest hole there. And then same thing over here. You expose those bolts by using your other hand and pulling your seat fabric away. Obviously this is backwards, but picture this from the other side. You wanna get to those 7/16 bolts by using your other hand, pulling that fabric out of the way. Remove those two bolts. This seat will drop down from these three brackets that are holding it, and you can pull it out from the bottom and your seat is completely removed. Once you're done with that, you want to pull your two interior panels, and this is rather simple as well. You've got this little trim piece right here, and what I did was stuck a flathead screwdriver in where my index finger is and pop that out, and these little spring clips will probably come off and drop in there. That's okay, because you're pulling this panel out. So pick those bad boys up and press them back on for when you're ready to install. You've got two screws right here, remove those. and you'll create this gap where you can slide your seat belt out. You got 4 screws. You got one here. You got one hidden down here in the carpet. You've got one up here at the top. And then you're gonna have one kind of hidden right here near the seat back. You get those 4 screws removed, that entire panel will come out easy, and you can use a flathead screwdriver to remove your wire from the harness on the speaker. You get those 4 pieces out of the way and you're ready. You can get to this point right here with the seat and the panels removed in about 10 to 15 minutes. So once you get that all taken care of, you're ready to rock. Now, this project assumes that your pump is working and you've got a battery in the car, because you're going to need to run the top up and down during this project. So the first thing I did, I see my shop light's now going dead, but that's okay. So once you get in here, you'll notice the first thing I did was I tied my seat belts together in a cross pattern. That gets them tight and out of the way, because you're going to be working over on each end. I don't know what year they went to it in terms of the interior headliner on a convertible, but you're going to want to remove that Velcro strap right there. And then you're going to want to remove that push pin. And that's going to allow you to have the headliner pushed out of your way like I've already done over here. That's what's going to allow you to see down there and get working. So the first thing you're going to do, and you want to do this on both sides at the same time. You don't want to do one side and then the other. You want to get this all removed on both sides, because you're going to be working the top again, up and down, or the mechanism, so to speak. So what you're going to want to do is remove that cotter pin, remove that bolt and all the bushings. There's a handful of bushings in there, and again, you want to save them all, particularly the black ones that are inside the eyelet of that ram. You want to transfer those to the new cylinder. But you've got some spring washers in there too that you want to save. Once you get both sides removed, collect your parts, you're ready to turn the car on and run the top all the way down. Of course, the top's going to stay in place, but those cylinders are going to go those rams are going to go all the way down into the cylinder. Once you get to that point, this is where the easy part comes into play that I think some people have missed based on the comments I've read online. I read where one guy was removing all of these bolts and removing those bolts for that bracket. If you're removing those bolts and you're removing that piece, that's tied to the framework of the top, and to me that just seems like you got a disaster waiting in terms of realignment and adjustment and whatnot. Totally unnecessary. Leave all that in place. The magic, hello flashlight, the magic is right here. This gray bracket, that nut with blue Loctite on it, that is a 1/2 inch nut. You remove that and that's the ticket. Now, you can't get a ratchet in there with a socket. You can only get a wrench in there or a ratchet wrench. So obviously you want to use a ratchet wrench if you have it, but you remove that bolt, that bracket rides on a stud right there. And then that bracket has a stud on the other side, which goes into one of those holes I was showing you on the cylinder. Pull that bracket out and the cylinder is now completely free, and you can work it out the bottom, little twisting and turning, and it will come out with the lines intact, and it'll sit right there on the floor so you can work on it. Once you have both of your cylinders out, bring your new cylinders in, remove the safety caps, make sure your O-rings stay in place, and swap your lines one at a time. Again, making sure those O-rings stay in place on the new cylinders. This is going to be the messiest part of the project, where you get hydraulic or ATF on your hands. So have some shop rags in place, and you'll have a little bit of cleanup to do, but nothing major. So at this point, I left my cylinders on the floor pretty much right here with the lines intact. And this is where I decided to go ahead and bleed the system rather than hooking it all back up, because you're going to lose quite a bit of fluid. If you remember the size of that cylinder times 2, you compare it to the size of that motor, you're losing a lot of fluid. So the system calls for ATF. It's on a label right there. You're going to want to remove that rubber plug, get you a little squirt bottle, and you're going to do about 3 fills and bleeds in order to get this back up and running. So I pulled the plug, I filled it up until fluid started seeping out. I put the plug back in place with my cylinders, again, not reinstalled, just sitting here freely. I turned the car on and ran the top up, and what you'll find is the cylinders don't go up even, they're jumpy, and before it gets all the way to the top, you'll hear the motor starving for fluid. So at that point, I turned the car off, popped the rubber plug. I did the process again. I filled it up with fluid, put the plug back in, ran the top up and down into where the cylinders got a little bit more smooth. And again, before it got all the way to the top or the bottom, I could hear it starving for fluid. So the third time, for me, the third time was the charm. I filled it up again, pushed the plug back into place, and by now, my cylinders were going all the way up and all the way down smoothly and evenly, and I could tell they were hitting their stopping point and the motor was not starving for fluid. So again, for me, third time was a charm. So at that point, you're pretty much done and ready to reinstall and reverse course. So what I did was, you can work your cylinders back through that whole little twisting and turning with your lines all intact. You'll notice that the lines face forward when they're installed. You get that cylinder back in there and you get it to fit on the stud that's built into the framework pointing inward, and then you fish that bracket back into place. It rides on that stud. You got your bolt hole, and then the stud on the back side of that bracket wedges the cylinder into place. Put your nut back on, use your ratchet wrench, and that puppy is installed. So I think what a lot of people are missing is they start taking some of this stuff apart and none of that's necessary. That bracket, again, that's the magic ticket. So with everything reinstalled, the last thing to do is to get your upper bolts put back in and get your cotter pins in place again with the original bushing, the sleeves, and the spring washers. Now what I found on one side was the bolt went right in, no problem. On the other side, the bolt didn't quite hit the eyelet of that ram. So what I did was turn the car back on and just push the top up and down to where that, up or down, depending which way you need to go to get that eyelet to line up with the holes and get that bolt in place. Once you get those bolts both in place and cotter pins in place, you've already bled the system, you're done. So I'll back out of the car here. Those are the things that I found to make this a relatively easy project. Again, other than getting some hydraulic fluid on your hands and your tools, this is not a bad project. All said and done, if I had to do it again, I could probably get this done in 2 hours or less. So hopefully this video helps somebody that's going to be tackling this soon.